meeting is being recorded.
Jorge, can you share the screen? Welcome. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today, connecting to this session. This is a regional webinar, a pre-departure orientation. This is our third session. We are going to have another session on Wednesday regarding the pre-departure orientation from Education USA. So you know, you are muted and your video is turned off. If you have any questions at any time, please type your questions in the chat. This session will be available on our YouTube channel. And also please note that English closed captioning is available, so you can request it and you will be able to see the captions. Next. So the topic of the pre-departure orientation for today is the keys to US academic success. And before we start, maybe you are already familiar with Education USA, so I'm just going to give you a very brief introduction to Education USA. What is Education USA? What do we do? We are a global network of advising center. We work directly with the US State Department. We are represented all around the world. In the North America, Central America, and the Caribbean, there are 56 advising centers. Our services are free, and one of the services that we offer is the pre-departure orientation for those students that had already been accepted and are going to start their studies in the United States. So for the session, I would like to introduce my colleagues, Luisa. She works here in Mexico in the Advising Center in Puebla, Luisa Caballero, and also Ana del Arenal. She works in the state of Hidalgo, also here in Mexico. And they are going to moderate this session with our wonderful first level guest that we have today. So I'm going to let Luisa and Ana take the floor and start the session. And again, welcome, and please feel free to share your questions in the chat. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elvira. Hello, everyone. And Gonzalo and David, thank you very much for being with us today. We're gonna start with the questions that we wanna know about your experience and about what tips do you have for our audience. So I'm gonna start with, can you explain the academic system in the United States and the main differences with other, it can be Latin American countries? And I'm going to start with David, because with such an extensive experience in many countries, what are some aspects you identified?
Thank you, Ana. Excuse me, and it's a pleasure to be here. And thank you, Elvira, as well. And especially to all of the Education USA colleagues who are attempting to help the many students who want to study in the US. So first, just as a disclaimer, I studied at the university about 500 years ago, it seems. It was quite some time ago. We do stay in touch with universities for, especially for the English side of studies. So the intensive English programs are a key partner for us. But I also used to teach at the university system, and I had many foreign students who were waiting to get their TOEFL scores to begin their master's or PhD or even undergraduate studies. The question's a good one. I think the main differences that I see are the kinds of classrooms and the expectations in the classrooms, the classroom culture. And I believe there's another question about that. So I won't go into too much detail on that. The other difference is for some of the areas of study, especially medicine and law, the time in which students begin is different. So whereas in Mexico and in most of the rest of the world, students begin their medical or legal studies right after high school. In the US, it begins after the undergraduate year. The other differences that you might see is with regard to the number of flexible credits, discretionary credits that one might have while pursuing one's degree. The US usually, from what I've seen, tends to offer a little bit more latitude to students to pick other classes beyond specific requirements for their majors. And I think finally, the difference could be as well in the length of the degrees, where you might see, for example, some countries with a standard sort of 2 years for a master's. Depending on the university in the US and the major, you could see a shorter master's program, a 12-month master's program, for example. You could see a longer PhD program in the US than what I've seen in other countries. And of course, it depends on the amount of time it takes to write one's dissertation and conduct one's research. And even undergraduate studies, while we tend to be 4 years, which seems to be fairly common around the globe, you can see differences because we're really counting credits rather than semesters. So depending on what your background is, the number of credits, whether you study during the summer, it could be considerably shorter or even a bit longer. Back to you, Anna.
Thank you so much, David. And my apologies, I would like to read our guest speakers' bios because it's very important for our audience to know a little bit more about each one of you backgrounds. So I want to start with David's. David Fay is the Regional English Language Officer at the U.S. Embassy in Mexico City. He oversees public diplomacy outreach through English language teaching for the U.S. Department of State in Belize, Cuba, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Mexico. He has also served in Tashkent, Moscow, Lima, Ankara, and Islamabad. A Fulbright alumnus, he holds an undergraduate degree in Latin American Studies and Spanish, and graduate degrees in English language education, U.S. literature, and resource management. A native Iowan, David Fay became a diplomat in 2003 after nearly 2 decades as a teacher, trainer, and publisher working in the United States, Costa Rica, Spain, and Turkey. Thank you very much, David. And I would like to read our other 2 guest speakers. Gonzalo Isidro Bruno holds an EDD in language education and a master's in applied linguistics from Indiana University. His areas of research include metacognition, multilingualism, and second-third language acquisition in study abroad context. He is currently an instructor and program coordinator for the continuing and professional programs at the University of Hawaii at Manoa Outreach College. Welcome, Gonzalo, and thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you for the opportunity. And this is just paying back for me because I'm Mexican and I want to share my experiences and the enthusiasm I had when I once, was in some of the students' places now.
Thank you, Gonzalo. And we also have Freddy. He was born in Zacatecas, Mexico. Freddy obtained his graduate degree in civil engineering from the Universidad Autónoma de Zacatecas. After attending an academic English program at the University of Texas at Austin between 2019 and 2019, he worked as a project engineer at the Genaro Codina Economical and Social Development Department for 2 years. Currently, he's doing his master's degree in civil engineering sciences with a major in structural engineering at Texas A&M University. Welcome, Freddie.
Hello, and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to continue with the questions. So I'm going to go with Gonzalo. And Gonzalo, taking the first question that we mentioned about the academic system in the United States and differences with other countries, you've been living in the US for so many years. So what are some differences you've seen between the US and Mexico?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to know that the Department of Education in the US does not supervise or oversee universities. That is different compared to Mexico or many other countries in where the Ministry of Education checks and notices what the programs are, validates degrees, makes sure that everything is going well. In the US, universities are self-regulated in a way, because even though there are 6 agencies for accreditation of all universities in the US, somehow they don't have a standard system to check and regulate their services. So every university can be different, and differences in universities, it's important because they provide different places for students to find and get the kind of education that they're looking for. But many of them are also very, very well differentiated. And I mean by that some focus on, believe it or not, there are like women's universities, the population is only women. There are liberal arts colleges. There are full universities that grant undergrad, grad, and grad and postgraduate degrees. So depending on where they are located, they also specialize on different aspects of knowledge. They can be close to the ocean, and then you specialize in marine biology, for example. So again, universities in the US are very distinctive, and that's a plus. And that's something that is very important for all potential students to know, because you have to find the best match for yourself. So that's also kind of like an advice that I have for everyone who's looking for a good match. Do your research, talk to people who graduated from that university to see if they will be giving you the results and the kind of university experience that you're looking for.
Perfect. That is an awesome answer. Thank you very much, Gonzalo, which leads us to our next question. How is the grading system and how students are evaluated at the US universities? So Freddie, you've been studying in Texas A&M for a while now. Tell us about your experience. When you get a grade, it is based on what? Just the score of the exam or what else?
Okay, so main difference for the grading system in the US is that they don't use numbers, at least for the grades. They give you letters, which is from A through F. The letters are A, B, C, D, and F. While, for example, in Mexico, we use the grading system from 0 to 10. And you need at least 6 to pass the course. In the US, you need at least a D, but if you get a D, you need to take the course again in most of the cases. So probably a C is the passing grade. In my master's, for example, I need to have a grade of B to be in good standing and to maintain my fellowships. And also the master's program and the PhD, I think they require you to have a B in order to be in good academic standing and not being in probation. They call it like that because you don't have the required grade of B. So I'll say that's the difference. And the grading system, I think is very similar to Latin American countries. I have exams, I have homeworks, some projects. And the distribution of the grades tends to be the same. Also, exams tend to have more weight. Let's say, for example, 40% of the grade will be an exam, and 40% of the grade will be a final exam as well. Probably 10% will be the homeworks, and 10% a project or a semester project, let's say. So I think the grading scale is the same. I mean, the grading is the same, but the grades will be in letters and numbers. Probably that's the difference I've seen so far.
Yes. You explained it very well. And also our next question for David, as Freddy was saying, that in Mexico is most commonly used 10 to 0. So in higher education institution, as Freddy was saying, is letters. What else, can you tell us about, from your perspective, based on grading?
Yeah, to add to Freddie's great comments, I'd just say that it depends a bit on your major as well. So often in liberal arts, rather than exams, you're getting papers. You could also be graded on group work, participation in class. You could be asked, especially for majors such as architecture or fine arts, to put together a portfolio of your works, and that would be graded. In addition, it seems that it can differ really from professor to professor. Professors, if they're giving exams, they might grade out of 100, they might grade out of 10. They might approach grading in a gamified way, which is a fairly new trend, where students are not necessarily deducted points from a whole of, say, 100, but rather they accumulate points and are given a grade based on the points they accumulate. I think it's still a little on the rare side. I don't think that many professors go with that approach, but I do know a few in the liberal arts fields.
Well, good to know for our audience, because depending on the university, the program, and your teacher, it might vary a little bit, right? Yeah. So keeping on with the questions, so how classes in the US universities are different from classes in other Latin American countries? What are the expectations from professors? How international students should prepare for their classes? And I'm gonna start with Gonzalo. We know that the higher the grade you are studying, the more difficult it gets. Give us some tips for our students, Gonzalo, please.
Well, I would like to preface my comments by saying that professors at American universities expect students to be independent. So they will have office hours, and you should take advantage of these opportunities. Sometimes they would have assistants. So professors have a number of assistants that help them with either grading or running meetings, or in some cases running labs. So they might not get to know you that well, but it's very important that you as a student, develop your skills as an independent learner, meaning, okay, the instructor is going to give you assignments and homework. Well, you should go ahead and do them, but try to do more. That is very important. And so classes are no longer a place where you go sit and listen, but it's a place where you are expected to be responsible and take control over your learning. If you're having problems understanding, nobody's going to do anything if you don't go to office hours and ask for help. There are a number of centers available. Well, first of all, start with your class, the assistants in the class, or the professor directly, make an appointment. But also there are other services like a writing service and another, well, I think we're going to talk about that later, but don't wait until the very end. From the very beginning, plan your class, don't miss any sessions, do the readings and all that. So again, that's a big difference, I suppose.
Thank you very much, Gonzalo. And I would say also, consider the size of the university and the size of the groups, because if it's a really big group, then there will be less hours for giving you, to giving you time to explain again that topic that you didn't understand. So those are things that they should take in consideration, right?
Yes, and actually, maybe I should say that traditional lecture halls were very impressive. You know, there were huge hall rooms in which, you know, there was a professor up there in the front, and there could be over 100 students. That would be the case of introductory, you know, freshman courses. So it's, you know, it's very likely that, you know, nobody will notice if you're there or not. So then, yeah, it's really hard to hit that feeling of individualized attention. But of course, you know, depending on what your class you're taking, you could also be taking seminars or specific classes in which there are fewer students participating in labs. So it all depends on the class you're taking and your major. So it all depends. Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much. Freddie, do you think the relation between professor and student is very different than here in Mexico? How international students should prepare for classes in the US?
Well, I think probably the relationships are less personal in the US. You may go and ask something, and the next class he won't remember you. Like in Mexico or other countries, the professors tend to remember students. Just as Gonzalo said, sometimes there are like classes of 50 students, then the professor, it's hard for him or her to remember you. Also, the class time is different, I think, it's different in the US than here in Mexico, for example. In Mexico, we used to start sometimes 10 minutes later or leave 10 minutes early. And in the US, you start at the time of the class. You almost never start late. And the class always ends at the time it is supposed to end. You never go early on a class. For the expectations for students, professors, most of the time, they expect you to have previous knowledge of the class, or sometimes the classes have prerequisites you need to have. But also, if you need help, professors, most of the time, they are very supportive, and they help you if you need something. If you don't know, probably they'll tell you you need to research on your own. But if you research and you don't find your question, if you go to his office, he will likely help you. They are very supportive professors.
Thank you for that answer. And it is really important for our audience to know that. And maybe the approach would be a little different, but we will always, or they will always have a really good answer for them. So speaking of our next question, Gonzalo, can you explain to our students what it is a syllabus and why it is important?
Well, basically a syllabus is a course description with a calendar and a bibliography. Those are some of the most important elements. So you will know what the course is like, what the content will be, when you know the classes will be, and sometimes when you have projects due, assignments, homework, and when you have to do the readings by, etc. And then of course the bibliography, the books that you're supposed to read, or in some cases, it can be videos on the internet, it can be other resources that are available to you. So the syllabus is basically acting as the roadmap that tells the student what's going to happen, where you're going to go, and where you're going to end up. And that's important because envisioning yourself at the end of that road is really the most important part, you know, because sometimes you're used to going to class and seeing, okay, what's the class today about? And no, I mean, you have to know what's going to go on. Otherwise, you're going to end up feeling lost very soon. So the syllabus plays a really important role in your classes. I would say that I'm almost can say that every instructor will give you a syllabus, but the level of detail will vary. So that's something that you might have in mind. Some professors are very detailed; they stick to the plan, no changes at all. Some others are a little bit more lenient and they make adjustments along the way. So both ways are valid. So have that in mind. And yeah, so that's basically, oh, and it's really important because again, that it's a roadmap. So
I
that's
was
it.
gonna say that, like, get familiar the first class, because then you know what to expect, what you have to do, and maybe sometimes like start reading in advance what you're gonna see in the next classes, right?
Yes, and actually, I would even say that some students that I have seen, that I have known, go to many classes, get the syllabus from the instructor, and then they make decisions about which class to drop, which class to add, because
Right.
that's also another possibility. So I mean, you might say, okay, this class doesn't meet the expectation, doesn't cover the content that I thought it was going to do, but now I know. And so some students actually make changes, and that's a possibility.
Exactly. Thanks a lot, Gonzalo. And now we want to talk about plagiarism. And David, can you explain this concept and why is it so relevant for international students?
Sure, Anna. So plagiarism is often referred to as copying, but it's a little bit more sophisticated. It can take a lot of different forms. Many people think about, for example, copying on an exam. Plagiarism is basically taking the ideas or the knowledge, the thoughts of somebody else and claiming them, or giving the false pretense that it is one's own work. And it's really sort of at the heart of Western education, I'd say, and maybe that's unfair to say, at the heart of education in general. And it goes back to something that Freddie was referring to, and that is being independent, but also being responsible for yourself, for your activities, for your work. Students need to make sure that they are referencing or citing any work that they're using. And there are many different ways that universities help students. There are all kinds of online programs as well. So when one is writing a paper, they can use those to help organize and include a bibliography and the correct kind of citation. Professors will often say, especially at a graduate school level, what they expect from the students in the research papers. In fact, there are often classes that are taken by the students to make sure that they're on track with regard to the correct form and format of the paper. But suffice it to say, it's critical to refer to whoever it is that you're whose work you're using, and to make sure that you never give even the slightest suggestion that it is your own work.
Exactly. And we would like to know, have you had this experience when teaching that you catch a student,
Yes, I have, and I noticed when I was teaching that I usually taught students from other countries. So as an English instructor, when I was teaching students who were coming from all over the world. And it did seem to be very common for certain students from certain countries. I think it took them a while to get used to this system. The nice thing about the intensive English program is that it's not a degree-bearing program. It's a program that most universities have to prepare the student in terms of their English language level. And certainly to a certain extent academic culture as well. So if they are going to make mistakes, it's a good place to be able to make them and learn, because if those mistakes, especially plagiarism, if that's made while taking a course, different universities have different warning systems, and some have no tolerance approach. So if you're caught once, then you're possibly dismissed from the university. So we were able to work with the students that we saw as in some cases very egregiously plagiarizing. And of course, with the internet now, it's very easy to look up to see if they're lifting, using parts of somebody else's work. And again, there are programs that professors use and that they ask students to use as well on their own papers before turning them in.
Right.
Yes, and I think this is a really important topic because nowadays we have a lot of information on our hands, but we could use very wrong also that information, and it could have a lot of consequences. So our next question is, what would be your recommendations for international students to prepare for the academic rigor at US institutions? So Freddy, what are the things you wish you knew before starting your program?
Okay, so I wish I had known that the classes will be that heavy. I didn't know that before going to the US. I mean, at least here in my university where I did my bachelor's, it wasn't that heavy. Then when I moved to the US, I realized that it's really, really heavy. So if you ask me for a recommendation, you better have a schedule or a calendar where you write everything you need to submit and the deadlines for everything. And also, you also need to find time for yourself because sometimes your week will be really, really heavy. You don't, sometimes you feel you don't have time even to sleep or something else, but you need to have a good schedule with enough hours of dream. Also, if you can find a hobby like going to the gym or something in the afternoons, let's say 1 hour, 1 hour and a half, probably you won't have times on the weekend to do sports or something. You sometimes even in the weekends you work on your projects, homeworks, and that's the time when you have time to do all the work you need to do. But yeah, my recommendation will be to have a schedule and have enough hours of dream to give your body enough rest.
Perfect. And can you share with our students, like, how is your schedule like on a daily basis based on what you were saying, that you need to be very focused, that you need to, like, on Sundays maybe do homework? How is like your schedule on a normal day?
Okay, so this last semester I have like three classes, one class every day, and I think on Tuesdays and Thursdays I had 2 classes. So I went to school. Commonly, I came back from school at 12 p.m. Then I start my homeworks and projects. Then like at 4:30 p.m. I go and prepare some food and eat something. And then I came back to work again. And at night, like 8:30 p.m., I go to the gym, and then I come back home at 10 p.m. That'll be from Monday through Friday. Saturday, I used to spend the whole Saturday doing my homeworks and projects. And I had a job this semester. I was grading for an undergrad class. I used to grade the homeworks that undergrad students had. And I spent the Sunday from probably 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. grading those homeworks. And then I rest the rest of the afternoon on Sundays. Yeah, it was a little bit heavy, but as I said before, I used to go to sleep early every day, and then I wake up as early as well, but I try to sleep as much as possible. That's important.
Yeah, I agree with you. Try to sleep as much as possible. And thank you for sharing your schedule. I think it would be really useful for students, like, to have an example of a daily basis. And Gonzalo, in this same question, you work with international students. So what are your recommendations also for them to prepare for this academic rigor at US institutions?
Well, basically, time management, it's very important, as was mentioned. I would say some students are used to procrastinating, that is waiting until the last minute. And I know that, you know, coming from Mexico, sometimes that is something that happened to all of us, but we need to make sure that work is done in advance in a timely manner, and that you meet deadlines, because there's flexibility for some areas of studies, but meeting deadlines, you know, assignments, taking exams, submitting work, does not have that kind of flexibility. And you have to be aware of that, because otherwise you're going to be overwhelmed by all the amount of work. So having said that, yes, I want to just also mention that taking care of yourself, again, getting enough rest, nourishment, you know, eating healthy, doing some exercise, that's very helpful, because you get overwhelmed and stressed out. You know, if some students are new, let's say, to the US, then they will find out that there's a degree of cultural shock. Then you start missing your home and your dear loved ones. And so that also affects your academic life. So you have to be aware that that is going to happen. You maintain contact with them, you know, through Facebook, you know, maybe a phone call or that. Take care of that, but then move on. You know, don't dwell too much into like, okay, I'm homesick and I don't feel like doing homework. No, I mean, like, okay, just write a message, a WhatsApp, and then, you know, say hello and then move on. You know, prepare, because as I was saying, as you know, we're saying, the amount of work that is expected from you, it's bigger than what you might have thought. And that is very important to know, because the expectations are high and you need to meet them.
Yeah, I agree. And I was also thinking to ask you, David, like, any additional recommendation, as Freddy and Gonzalo were also saying, but do you have also like an example of a student, like maybe like didn't, I don't know, like prioritize school, and then like you have any example, like good or bad example of a student that you can like share with us today too?
I do, and I just wanted to commend Gonzalo on his great comments. I really think it's great advice, and I hope that students heed that advice. Yes, I've known students like that in very personal ways, actually, and I think it's exactly what Gonzalo is saying. It's the students who put things off, who procrastinate, who wait until the last night before the exam to study, or to write the paper. It's so important to you know, use the syllabus that Gonzalo was describing before, this roadmap, and really get ahead of the class if you can. Not just stay up with the class, but actually get ahead of it. What Freddie was saying about the amount of time is true. Reading, there's a tremendous amount of reading that is expected of you. So picking up some skills on prioritizing your reading, which ones you really want to do first, how thoroughly and carefully you need to read some things, and how skimming is important for others, so that you're not going into a lot of detail on it. I also wanted to just mention that, you know, Freddie mentioned working out. You know, your mind is part of your body, and I think it's one of the things that's really nice about campuses now, and I've seen it here in Mexico as well, but it's certainly the case in the U.S. They have wonderful student recreation centers and sports centers, and they are part of your student service fees usually. So once, you know, you pay your required student service fee, you get to use the gym, and many gyms, especially at large universities, are open 24/7. So I can't think of a better thing to do when one does have a little bit of free time than going to the gym, to just, you know, make sure that your body stays in shape as well, and to not rely or over rely on Coca-Cola or coffee or sugar to get you through the difficult study period. You need to treat your body well, stay in good health, and that will really reflect on your grades.
Exactly. Just take care of yourself, keep yourself healthy and in shape as much as they can, of course, because school is important. But so David, continuing with those, tips and resources and recommendations, and for those students that do not procrastinate, what kind of resources or support is available for international students to support their academic reading and writing skills? You talked about this a little bit earlier with the plagiarism topic, but also we want you to share. We know that Rilo has tons of resources, some of them even for free. So if you can give us some examples.
Sure. So I'll start simply by saying that the load, again, depending on what you're studying and the class that you're taking, the professor that you've got, the load for reading and writing could be very high. Reading is one thing that you might be used to, but writing seems to be the skill that everybody struggles with. And it's really a matter of exercising those skills. The more you write, the better you get at it. The more you read, the better you get at it. So be sure to do a lot of both of those things. As far as the resources that are available at the universities, first, be sure to reach out. Again, Freddie mentioned going to the professor if you don't understand something. Be sure, don't be shy, don't be quiet. If you've got an issue, ask other students, ask many professors have graduate assistants that help them. You can ask them if you can't find the professor, or maybe instead of the professor. Look for international students who have already been there for 1 or 2 years so that they can give you some guidance as well. Many universities have a separate sort of office space for international students. They don't necessarily deal with academic support like reading and writing, but they deal with a lot of other things with regard to making sure students feel part of the campus. However, there are resources at, I believe, almost every university to help students with reading and writing. And it's usually an office. Sometimes it's connected to the library. Sometimes it's an independent office altogether. It's usually staffed. Many times you can seek out an appointment. Often universities will hire higher level students, graduate students or undergraduate students who are good at writing, for example, to help. So you just need to ask. You need to be sure that you're asking the right questions. And if you don't get the answer you want after asking the first person, find somebody else. Online, there are plenty of resources as well. We offer through our website, americanenglish.state.gov. This is the State Department's service to institutions and individuals, and especially English educators, to give them basically free tools, free resources. There are courses, massive open online courses that can help prepare students for US study, for academic writing, especially. Apart from our resources, there are others. There are a number of websites that offer free, massive open online courses. So even before traveling, I would consider enrolling in them. And again, apart from our programming through americanenglish.state.gov, our open programs, our online professional English network, look at other course offerings through Coursera or edX, two other great sites that have courses. You can also find tools. Some universities have some excellent tools. One comes to mind called OWL. It's the Online Writing Lab. I believe it's supported through the University of Indiana, if I remember correctly. Is that, Gonzalo, your alma mater, if I remember correctly? It is
That's
one
right.
of the better collections of resources that I've seen. So do your search, do your homework, and be sure to begin that habit of practicing academic writing as soon as possible. Oh, it's
Yes.
Purdue. Very good. Thank you, Elvira.
Thank you so much, David, for all those amazing resources. We, as well as Education USA, we have a blog and it's open to the public. At the end, you're gonna see the link. So that's another resource that we offer you. And Gonzalo, I know that you are the, if I'm not wrong, the coordinator, director from continuing and professional programs department, right? From Hawaii University. Do you have some resources, courses maybe that you offer for this purpose of supporting the academic reading and writing skills?
Well, let me just clarify. I work for the Outreach College, which is one of the colleges of the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And the continuing and professional programs precisely have courses that support adult learners who are out of school, or maybe they're still in school, and they are specialized courses. Some of them are for students who already have a degree. So, but we also have another unit that is for intensive English language programs. So that's where they would probably get support. Now, maybe I would probably say that at the university, there is a department that provides writing support. And that's in general, because sometimes one might think that it's only for international students, but no, there are a number of just students, American students, who also need support for writing. So the tutorials are not actually, it's not someone who's going to help you, okay, well, there's a grammatical mistake or something like that. No. What they do is they help you organize your ideas, present your thoughts in an explicit manner and logical manner. And in that way, you can present your papers to professors. So this is again, this is a service that is provided at the university for all students. It's free of charge. You can make appointments, and this is replicated, in all universities that I know in the U.S. Now, of course, if you wanted to take specific courses, some of them can be created by demand. And that's something that I specialize, but not necessarily with English. It can be in general.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gonzalo. That was great. And well, Freddy, you are a current student. So what are some resources that you are actually using that you can share with our audience?
Okay, so some universities have special courses in order to improve your academic writing and reading. When I was in the University of Texas at Austin, they have an academic English program where they offer academic writing and reading, and they teach you how to write in graduate program. I actually prepared to show you a book, which is here. This is the book we use in the University of Texas at Austin. It's academic writing for graduate students. I think this is the 3rd edition. And anyone wanting to buy this can send me an email or something, and I can tell you the citing for this book. Also, almost as Gonzalo was saying, almost every university has a writing center, which will help you with dissertation writing, for example, in the University of Texas at Austin and Texas A&M, where I'm currently doing my master's. They have in the website, they offer one-to-one consultations, also dissertation article and thesis assistance. study groups to improve writing skills, and workshops and some other services which really help you to improve your writing. Websites can be used as well. But yeah, I think those are really good resources.
Thank you so much, Freddy. And thank you so much to all of you, David, Gonzalo, and Freddy. This is the end of this panel. I'm gonna give the floor to Elvira to see if there's any questions from the audience. Elvira?
Thank you, Anna. There is one question here in the chat that is very brief to answer, I think. Somebody, Maricruz Diaz, is asking, normally, how long a class is? And I'm going to go ahead with the answer, and please, David, Gonzalo, and Freddy, if I am mistaken, you can correct me. But I would say it's something that you cannot say normally, because it will depend in your program, if you are an undergraduate student, a graduate student, if your class has maybe some practical component to do the class. So it could be a class from 45 minutes, or maybe a class all day long. So it is not like a normal load. So I don't know if I'm saying this right, or do you have any other insights on that?
I think you're right. I think what's interesting to see as well is that's maybe what would be standard for a synchronous, whether it's in person or online class. Classes become a lot more fluid with regard to the way online versus in person may interact. And I think there tends to be a general standard. So a 3-credit course would roughly be about 3 hours a week. A 4-credit lab course science class would be more like 4, because you get the extra lab hour. But again, I think, Elvira, you're right. It really, really varies. I'm curious to hear what Freddy says, because he's the one who's in the middle of a master's right now.
Yeah, I think what you say is right. Like one of my classes was 50 minutes long. It was 3 times a week, which is almost 3 hours, as you said. And then the other classes, I have 2 classes a week, and they were like 1 hour and 20 minutes long. So yeah, almost 3 hours, let's say. But it depends on the class and the program you're taking.
Okay, and I have another question for you, Freddy. What were your personal challenges, your academic challenges, when you were just starting your program? If you have any academic shock, or everything was just smooth, how it was when you was starting your program?
Yeah, I think it wasn't that smooth, but sometimes you don't get some concepts or words. It's I think the most common thing for international students. You don't catch them. And what I did is I used to write them down, and then search for those concepts for the next class. I used to search for them immediately after the class. Sometimes if I don't do that, I forget it. Then the next class I will be with that knowledge before. Also, one thing that I saw in the classes is that most of the students, or some of them, didn't understood what the professor said, but they didn't ask. And I wonder why they didn't ask, if they didn't know. And one thing I recommend for all the other students that are about to start their programs is always ask what you don't understand in the class or in the office hours, because I don't know if that's it in all the majors, but at least in my case, they didn't ask the professor the concept of or the idea he just said. I don't know why, but I used to ask everything I didn't understand. Sorry.
Thank you, Freddy. And just for all our guests here, if you have any final thoughts that you would like to share with our audience before we finish, we have about 1 minute to say goodbye. So it will be great if you can just have a last word for our audience today. So we can start with David.
Grit is the word that I think of, and when I listen to Freddy, I think about it. Just stick with it, really. Make sure you follow through and you map it out, and you stay positive. Congrats to Freddy on his master's, and Gonzalo, always a pleasure seeing you, and Thank you for all that you're doing to help Mexicans, young Mexicans, try to get to some level of further study. And thanks to Education USA.
Thank you, David. Gonzalo, do you have any final thoughts?
Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity. I would also like to say that you need to be prepared to also have the best time of your life, because living on a campus of a university is a great experience, a lot of social opportunities. Make sure that you take advantage of the facilities, the people in the community. It's going to be a wonderful time. And like as David has said, you know, just make sure you have a plan and get your work done and enjoy it. It's both things can be combined. Just plan it. And thank you again for this opportunity, and thank you, David, for the kind words.
Great, thank you. And what about you, Freddie? Any final thoughts?
Well, I'll say enjoy the experience, get new friends, and as Gonzalo was saying, be brave and to give your best. You will be fine, new students.
Thank you, great. And I have a final question that says how to balance your academics with your personal life. But we are not going to go into that topic because next week, and Jorge, I'm going to ask for your help to share the flyer for next week, if you have it handy. On Wednesday, we will have our last pre-departure orientation for the regional webinar team. And this is exactly, we are still waiting for the image. It's coming. I hope so. But it's exactly how to, right there. Yeah. How to balance your mind and body. So don't miss our last pre-departure orientation next week. We'll share with all the people that registered today the link to register. And thank you, Jorge. If you can just go to the next slide. And we invite you to, if you have any questions, any comments, if we didn't answer if we didn't answer your questions today, you can send us an email and we'll be happy to follow up with you. Thank you very much. And again, David, Gonzalo, and Freddie, thank you for being here and sharing all your expertise with us. Thank you.